Hello, and welcome to Firehouse Table Talks podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Toma. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm also a career firefighter and paramedic with over 20 years on the job. On this podcast, the views and opinions expressed are those of the participants, and they in no way reflect the views or opinions of our employers. This podcast serves to give a unique peek behind the curtain into the lives of our nation's first responders, military veterans, and their families. These are their stories, raw and uncensored. Now, pour yourself a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and join us at the table. Thanks for tuning in. Now, on to our show.
We can go home to
So today we have Sergeant Michael Sugrue with us. He's an international best-selling author, national speaker at Relentless Courage, winning the battle against frontline trauma. Michael's also a United States Air Force veteran. Correct me if I'm wrong. You served from 98 to 2004?
Correct.
And you were a security officer, also a Phoenix Raven, which we'll talk about that a little bit. Discharged, you were an officer, got out as a captain in 2004. And then joined Walnut Creek Police Department. That's where your main career was. Again, author of Relentless Courage. And we'll go over the book and a little bit of your story. Pretty much Michael's on the front line, breaking the stigma on the mental health crisis that plagues our first responder community. And he's joining us today. We're going to talk about his career, his story, his book, and whatever else you want to talk about. I'm going to close that out. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Air Force veteran, we'll start with military service. You went in 98.
Correct. Yeah, I went in straight out of college. I was on a ROTC scholarship, California State University, Sacramento. And my first choice was security forces. That's what I wanted to do. My original plan was to do just 4 years, which was my commitment, get out and go into federal law enforcement. But a lot of things happened. 9/11 being one of those. I was actually stationed in Germany when that happened. And a few months later, I found myself in the Middle East. But I ended up staying in 6.5 years active duty. Served all over the world, from Europe, South America, the Middle East, all over the United States. And honestly, I look back now and my biggest regret was getting out of the Air Force. I truly wish that I would have stayed at least on the reserve side. You know, I still wanted to go civilian law enforcement, but I really missed the camaraderie, you know, the experiences, the travel, the operations. I mean, just everything about it. I mean, I look back fondly on my military career.
That's awesome. And you were specialized law enforcement, global force protection, anti-terrorism, nuclear security. So how long were you in the Air Force when you had the chance to join the Phoenix Raven?
So I actually joined that in 2003. So I was in for a year. That was a long time goal of mine. And the Phoenix Raven program is actually for air mobility command bases. And those are the bases that have that program. So I actually got stationed at Travis Air Force Base here in California, actually close to where I live now. And I was the chief of security forces. And so from day one, that was a goal of mine, because the people that I supervised were Phoenix Ravens. And I wanted to show them, I wanted to lead by example, that, you know, I want to go through the training. I want to serve. I want to do the missions. And looking back now, as far as my military career, one of my proudest accomplishments. I mean, I really, really am glad I did that.
That's great. And you did that for the rest of your commitment to the military while you were there?
Yeah, my last year. So I was part of what's called an AMOG, an Air Mobility Operations Group. Now they're actual full wings, but we also had specialized teams called GMAT, Global Mobility Assessment Teams. And we would go in small groups with different people from different career fields to foreign airfields and assess them for suitability for U.S. operations. Some of those were down in South America and Colombia. But yeah, that assignment was a dream assignment. I mean, again, I wish I could still be in serving, because it was great times.
Well, that's a big sentiment a lot of us veterans have, is, you know, to go back and even though we're a little older, I'd go back and do it all over again. Wouldn't do anything
Absolutely.
different.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, the knees and the back say otherwise.
I
So
feel you
your
on that.
career in law enforcement started before you joined the military, your desire to serve as a police officer because you had a family member. Was it your father or stepfather that was a police officer?
Yeah, so my parents got divorced when I was young. My stepfather came into my life very early on. He was already in law enforcement when I met him. He worked for a couple different agencies here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And at the age of 8 years old, I was actually a police volunteer for his first agency, Sausalito PD. And, I look back now, I kind of joke about it. I mean, it was literally like I would wash patrol cars, I would file paperwork, but I had an official laminated ID card. And I just remember the camaraderie, the family feeling, just the excitement. And I knew from that point on that law enforcement was what I wanted to pursue. And so when I got a little bit older, when I was in high school, I actually joined the Police Explorer program, or was a police cadet for the Richmond Police Department, which is also here in the Bay Area. And, in college, my focus was criminal justice. And so I was one of those guys where I always had a plan. Things changed, but I always had goals, always had plans. And initially that was federal law enforcement. And I figured that to get into like the DEA or US Marshals or FBI, I had to have a college degree. And on top of that, I had to have work experience. And so I figured knock both out with once, get my degree, go into the Air Force, serve in law enforcement there, and just transition right away into federal law enforcement. But working with some of those different agencies, I just realized that that really wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be out in the field every single day, pushing a black and white, wearing a uniform, responding to 911 calls, making traffic stops, just literally, out in the field and not stuck in some office somewhere. And so I decided to go local instead of federal.
Yeah, sitting behind a desk doesn't. I don't think anybody with the type A mentality. I don't think sitting behind a desk is something that interests any of us.
No, no, absolutely not. And I knew, that's the other thing too, is I knew in the Air Force, as I moved up in rank, it was going to be less hands-on and more stuck in the office. And that's not what I wanted to do. If I could have stayed in the
Right.
field the entire time, as I was as a lieutenant and as a young captain, then that would have been a big difference there.
And then so you were discharged in 2004, and sounds like pretty soon after that is when you joined Walnut Creek, correct?
Yeah, I was actually on use or lose or terminal leave when I started the police academy. So I started the police academy in July of 2004, and my terminal leave actually went all the way up until September or August of 2004. And so, yeah, I was still in. I graduated the police academy in December of 2004, and that's when I started my civilian law enforcement career. And the Walnut Creek Police Department is also here in the San Francisco Bay Area in Northern California.
Yeah. So when I was in the Navy, I was actually stationed there in Alameda.
Oh, okay.
So I
Awesome.
love the Bay Area. Sausalito was one of my favorite towns, and I tell people Sausalito, where's that?
Oh,
I
it's
bet you don't know.
beautiful.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, it's like almost being in like Italy and way too expensive. I couldn't afford to live there, but it's
Oh yeah,
absolutely
it's nice
beautiful.
to drive through, but
Yes,
as you're
very
driving
nice.
through it, you're like, ooh, yeah, I don't make enough to live here.
No, definitely
So
not.
your resume with Walnut Creek expanded. I'm looking at some of your accomplishments. Patrol officer, you were a driving training instructor, field training officer, SIU detective, undercover. You got a lot of initials there: DOJ, Narcotic Task Force, PIO, and Patrol Sergeant. So again, I think I remember either it was in the book or in one of your podcasts how you said that you've always had the aspiration to be the police chief.
That's true. My father retired as a lieutenant, and I always had this dream, this goal of running my own department, running my own agency. And my civilian career was literally off the charts. I remember everything was aligning, every opportunity, every special assignment. I ended up getting promoted very quickly on. So 8 years on in my civilian career, which for my department was fast, I got promoted to sergeant. And literally, I saw the future ahead. I was like, man, everything's just falling in place. Everything's going perfectly.
That's I mean, like I said, and it was heading that way and until events transpired, and was that 2012, correct?
It was, yeah. So the very end of 2012, I was actually a brand new sergeant. I was only on my second solo shift because I had had a kind of like an informal training process before that where you ride along with other sergeants. You kind of learn how they run teams, how they respond to calls, report approval, lineup, all that kind of stuff. And my shift started December 26th, so the day after Christmas. Was working the graveyard shift. I was the only supervisor on duty for the entire city once it hit like 1:30 in the morning. And it was my Friday. I was going to be off for several days. Happily married, beautiful 2.5-year-old daughter, had just bought my dream house. Like I said, just been promoted. And unfortunately, I had to respond to a horrific incident where a man armed with a butcher knife had broken into a condo and was trying to kill a couple. And once we got there, I was first on scene. That subject then tried to kill myself and my officers. And unfortunately, I had to take his life, not only to save my life, but the lives of the couple that was barricaded in their bedroom. And so that incident, I call it my tipping point because I had been involved in hundreds of critical incidents before that. Just, horrible things that we see day in, day out as a law enforcement officer. But this one is the one that broke me.
Yeah, it's the one thing about doing these professions is, so much compiles as you go through this profession. And it always seems to be just one thing that just causes the downfall or the collapse of it all. So, I mean, touching on that, you didn't just save the couple in that apartment, you also saved your fellow officers as well. I mean, it puts you in a bad spot. You got to do what you have to do. You deserve to go home at the end of your shift, just like the other officers do.
Absolutely. And, I wouldn't change a thing. We did what we had to do. We are cleared eventually by the internal investigation as well as the external investigation by the district attorney. But we were sued almost immediately by the suspect's family. I endured 4 years of depositions. Eventually was a defendant in federal court in San Francisco in 2016. One of the worst places you can imagine to be a police officer on trial. And it was just that this incident that I wanted to forget. I had to remember every finite detail. I mean, every single detail, and I had to relive it time and time again. And as much as I wanted to just go away, I wanted to forget about it, I couldn't. And it was just horrific. I mean, my life, everything in my life started to go bad. My marriage fell apart. Eventually, it got to the point where I was getting divorced. I was fighting for custody of my beautiful daughter. My stepfather, my hero, he got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at 58, died a few months later. I started getting repeated skin cancer diagnoses. Things at work were falling apart. This $15 million lawsuit was constantly weighing over my head. And it got so bad.
I can only imagine.
It got so bad. It got to the point where I did not want to be here anymore. I literally wanted to die in the line of duty. And I started putting my officer safety aside, my good judgment, my tactics, my training, and purposely putting myself in dangerous situations, hoping a bad guy took me out at work.
And that seems to be a common theme with officers and first responders who suffer with complex PTSD and suicidal ideations is the risky behaviors while they're still on the job seem to increase. I remember one thing that struck me in your book, and I had one of those Me Too moments, was when you were talking about how you were testifying in court and you wanted your wife to be there because she didn't know what all had happened. And you thought maybe that would kind of shed some light on it. And we don't tell our families a lot of the stuff we do to try and protect them. But in a way, that can be damaging just as much.
It's one of the worst things you can do. And for me, it was one of my biggest mistakes. I made that mistake in the police academy. And I told myself that I would never bring work home. I would never talk about the job. And by doing that, I thought I was protecting my family. I was putting a barrier between them and the horrific things that I saw and had to deal with day in and day out. And when I came home pissed off or in a bad mood, they thought it was something they did. They didn't realize it was, a horrible car accident I had to go to that day, or suicide, or domestic violence case, because I wasn't talking about it. And so if people are watching this or listening to this, it's never too late to start talking about this, but you have to be able to get this crap off your shoulders and get it off your chest. And I didn't create that healthy environment or that healthy relationship with my wife at the time where I could openly talk about these things that I was seeing and dealing with. And I'm not talking about sharing with graphic details, but I'm saying, let them know what's going on. Let them know that, hey, I went to this horrific call today and I need some time to decompress. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go hit the gym. I'll be back, take a shower. We can sit down. We can talk about it, but bring them into the fold, not to the point where you're scaring them, but where you have this foundation, this level of trust and comfort that you can open up to them. Because the problem with me was I'd been married for years and years and years. I didn't talk about any of these incidents. And now my marriage is falling apart and it was too late for me. It was absolutely too late. And I didn't have her to lean on. I literally felt like I was on an island by myself and that there was nobody I could reach out to, nobody that I could talk to that would understand how I'm feeling and what I'm going through.
Yeah, I made the decision early on to kind of try and include my wife as much, like you said. She knows a lot of the stuff I've been through, but you leave a lot of those gory details out because, like you said, you don't want to really draw them in too much. But her most famous saying, she could tell by the way I came in the house. She couldn't even see me just by the way I shut the door. She knew whether it was a good time to talk to me or a bad time to talk to me. And she would tell our boys, give your dad some space today. He probably had a bad night. And I do believe that helped. And I do believe when I had my breaking point, I pretty much told her that I thought it would be best if she took the kids and left. And I think she knew I didn't mean it. And she called me on that. And right then and there was our come to Jesus moment where no, we're not going anywhere. You need to talk to somebody. You need to get some help. So she was actually very instrumental. And I don't know if she wouldn't have done that, I think it's probably safe to say I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. So
Amen, brother.
Talking to spouses, I do agree is very vital. Again, you don't have to give them all the details, but they have to know why. I mean, I'm still having issues with our teenage son. From all those times I just lashed out and just snapped just because I was in that frame of mind. And it's getting better, but I still need to sit down and have that talk with him, so he understands why. It wasn't him. It was more or less like a snap reaction from me instead, based on where I was mentally.
Absolutely, it makes a difference. And like I said, it's never too late to start.
Yeah.
We can make excuses why we don't, but in the end, it's only going to help. And that's why I say is, start today before the big one happens, because we never know what our breaking point's going to be. It's not always the worst incident. It's not always the biggest incident. It's different for everybody, but we never know when that breaking point's going to be. And you need to have that support system. You need to have people that you can truly count on that have your back, because as I found out, oftentimes our agencies, our departments, they only have our back for so long. And sometimes they abandon us and they leave us when we need them most.
And when we talk about the book, I was going to bring that up later in one of the chapters. You discuss, how the department handled what was going on. And, I think that's one thing that administrations can always get better at is, I think the mental health stigma is getting better, not only from, the worker standpoint, but from the supervisor standpoint. If they don't understand what's going on, but to recognize, when one of their employees may be having an issue and maybe the proper way to handle it and how not to handle it.
Yeah, I can tell you, I mean, it's getting better, but it's far from perfect, and there's so much more that needs to be done. I mean, I hear from police officers and firefighters regularly who eventually reach that point where they ask for help, and they're literally left out on an island. They're outcasted. Nobody wants to associate with them. They're not getting the resources they needed. They don't have that that backup or that support. And in my humble opinion, what I've learned through my process and the process of this book, the number one thing that's resonating with almost all readers and listeners, and this is across the world. I mean, Australia, Canada, the UK, it's what I call the institutional betrayal or administrative betrayal. I think that's what leads to suicide. You know, the horrific things that we see and deal with, whether it's on the battlefield or on the streets as first responders, don't get me wrong, that takes a toll. It absolutely takes a toll. But I think that that issue that pushes us over the edge is the administrative betrayal. And the unfortunate thing is, and I'm sure we're going to get to this, especially being fellow SAW alumni, but that institutional betrayal, administrative betrayal, it brings all that childhood trauma that we never talked about, that we never dealt with. It brings
that
it
dirty
right,
word abandonment.
right? It brings it right back to the surface. And for me, I was in denial about this. I had a good upbringing, but my biological father was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic. And in my early teen years, around that time frame, he literally abandoned me for his addictions. And I didn't realize really the impact of that, what that had on me. You know, I didn't realize until I went to Save a Warrior that I'd been self-sabotaging pretty much every romantic relationship I'd ever had, because if I ever got wind that something was going bad or something wasn't perfect, I'm like, nope, you know what? I'm going to leave you. You're not going to leave me. And it was that
Right.
feeling
Cut
of,
ties before they cut ties with you.
exactly, it's because I wanted to control it. But, you know, I literally
Right.
forgot about my childhood. I became a very successful first responder, was going on with my life. And it wasn't until the administrative betrayal came up when I needed my department the most, it brought back that unresolved childhood trauma. And the thing is, like, no first responder wants to admit it. They don't want to talk about it. They've forgotten about it. They pushed it aside. But the reality is, these early childhood experiences, and in some cases, don't get me wrong, it can be what I call on the minor end of the spectrum, like I had. So, like, you know, a parent that was an alcoholic or an addict, or maybe it was a parent who was working all the time that wasn't home. They were providing, but they weren't showing emotion. They weren't showing affection. They weren't that loving parent. And
Right.
so, or it can be very severe. It can be, you know, physical abuse, sexual abuse. But these things cause us to overcome adversity at a very young age. It makes us resilient. We become natural caretakers. We become decisive. You know, that's the thing, is that these qualities actually make us very good first responders. They make us great at what we do. That's the ironic part about this, is that, you know, if we didn't have that childhood trauma, we might not be as good of first responders as we are. But the issue comes down to,
Right.
if you do like I did and you just push it aside, you forget about it, but you never dealt with it, at some point in your life, it's going to come back to haunt you. And, you know, we've got multiple layers of trauma, right? We have our childhood trauma. We have our, what I call our street trauma or battlefield trauma. On top of that, we have moral injury. And then on top of that, we have the institutional betrayal and admin betrayal. So we're literally talking about, you know, 3 to 4 layers of trauma that are different, but they're all intertwined. And we have to work on each level of trauma to get better.
Right. That strange correlation between the ACEs scores and military and first responders is that's always kind of intrigued me. And just to sit down and talk to a clinician about that, and how they're shedding more light on that. I had a guest with one of the episodes. It was actually published today. We were talking about the correlation between ACEs scores and first responders, and you touched on a good thing. Is, you know, we learn resilience and caretaking early on in life, and that just transmits right into our adult life when we choose careers where we're pretty much tasked to take care of others. That's our job. So I don't think, like you said, you know, the childhood trauma and the things that happen when you're younger, you know, you just kind of pack that away, or just there's so much stuff in life that gets in the way. I don't even think you have time to even process it or deal with it. And then you start getting dogpiled with everything else in these careers. And it takes something like a trip to Save a Warrior to kind of say, hey, what do they call it? That thing behind the thing as to why we are the way we are. And you're like, oh, didn't think about that. And I think there's a lot more light being shed on that. And I don't know if there's more studies being done, but every time in this realm of mental health, you always hear the term ACEs coming up, and childhood trauma, and how much that correlates into everything from your childhood up until present day.
Absolutely. And, ironically enough for me, so I medically retired in 2018, and I thought I was good at that point. I dealt with my work trauma, I dealt with my shooting, I dealt with these other horrific incidents, and I was going about my life, being retired. And my biological father ended up actually also getting diagnosed with stage 4 cancer around that time and passed away a few months later. But before he passed, I decided to call him out on his shit and actually, for the first time in my life, stand up and address it. Well, he cut all ties with me, and I didn't even see him the last few months that he was here on this earth. And somebody told me about Save a Warrior, and I'm like, you know what? I don't need that. That's not for me. And but I also thought, I said, well, you know what? I do public speaking. I talk to first responders. I talk to military veterans. Let me just go down there and check out this program. And at least that way I can speak to it personally and endorse it or not endorse it. And man, I'll tell you what, it's one of the best things I could have ever done, because
Totally agree.
From the moment I got down there, I was able finally, after 40 plus years, to talk about this stuff, to process it, to reframe it, to actually forgive my father, and to be able to say goodbye to him in a way that I didn't get to while he was here. And so to say Save a Warrior was life-changing would be an understatement. It was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it changed so much for me in a positive way, and I think it helped complete that healing path that I was on. And it's given me a whole new life. That's the key. And to this day, I mean, it's obviously, I talk about it in the book. I talk about it when I speak. I actually just got a thank you message yesterday for somebody who just finished a cohort on how I was right, because I tell people all the time, just trust it, and just know that it will change your life. And I will honestly say that I think I've probably referred anywhere from 50 to 75 people that have gone there. Not a single one has ever come back and said it didn't change their life.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from experience as well. I will echo the same sentiments. I don't know what it is. They've got the secret sauce, whatever it is that these clinicians and doctors can't figure, and these pharmacists with medicines, they keep trying to shove at you. Here, take this pill for that, take this pill. They've got it figured out. And I know that they always say that there's companies that spend, millions of dollars trying to figure out why they're so successful in the way they do it. And I think a lot of it has to do with, we're coming back for ourselves. That's that old saying right here. No one's coming to save us but us. It's our guys coming back for us and shedding the light on, hey, you went through some stuff. You don't have to carry that around your whole life. Give it to me. Put it down. It's just causing you so much burden that you don't realize until you get that moment where you can just let it go and you feel 50 pounds lighter. And I remember I came back from Save a Warrior so energized. And before I left, some of the guys that led our cohort, I said, I know at least 5 guys that need this. I'm going to go home and they're going to be here. And the biggest, I don't want to say it was a kick in the teeth, but they said, you can tell them about it, but they have to want it. That's a huge thing in this line of work. Guys are just still so adamant. I'm fine. I can do this myself. And it's frustrating, because after coming home, you can see the ones that are really hurting. You can see it on their face, and you can suggest it all you want, but they have to be the ones that want it. And it's frustrating, because what awaits them on the other end. And all they have to do is just, hey, you know what? Put your pride aside. You've only got the rest of your life to be happy, unless you want to stay miserable.
I couldn't agree more. And, I was that person. I was in denial. I pushed it away. I'm like, I don't need this. Thanks. Hey, thanks a lot, but this isn't for me. I don't need it. And,
Right.
I think in the end, I went at the right time when I needed to go. And I hope that's how it works out for most people. But I tell people all the time, I would have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to give me what this program gave me. And it was free. I didn't pay a freaking dime. It
Yeah.
was run by phenomenal, phenomenal people who truly care, who have been there, who are living proof that you can overcome this stuff no matter how bad it is. And it's that combination of being with your brothers and your sisters and being in a safe, trusted environment where you can literally talk about anything and everything and not be judged, not be looked down upon, but actually lifted up and provided support and real love. I mean, real love of people that
Yeah, it
have
was
your
an
back.
awkward situation there because, we always have the shields up, and to just put them down. And it's the weirdest thing to just have a grown man give you a big hug like, hey man, it's cool. You're going to be okay. And you're like, oh, okay, it's still a little weird, but it's funny because like when you get together with Saw alumni, everybody's hugging and everybody's kind of looking like, what's going on there? It's just all out of love. We love each other and we help each other and we lift each other up. And I'm in a text thread with everybody from my cohort still, and it's been a couple years since I went, and it's just we really bonded as a group, and I think most cohorts do, and that's the special thing.
It is. Like you said, it's new friends and new family for life.
Yeah.
And I always think how ironic it is that, if we take our firehouses or police departments, that we serve decades with other people, and we're willing to run into a burning building, or we're willing to run towards an active shooter situation, knowing these men and women have our back to the fullest. But why is it that we can't actually open up to them and talk about these things and be real with them? It's like we trust them in one sense, but we don't trust them fully. And that's
Ego.
where we need to change this culture. Is we need to make it real family where people are open and they're honest and they're vulnerable. And I talk about this all the time, but if we don't have leaders that are setting the example, our fire chiefs, our police chiefs, and all the way down, we need them to show the example of, hey, look, we're all human. We've all been through shit. Let me tell you about what I've been through. And let me tell you how I came out of that successfully and came out the other side. Because no one's going to open up and be vulnerable themselves if the people above them aren't going to do the same and do it first. And so that's absolutely critical to this whole equation, is that we need our leaders to step up, to be honest, to be open, to be vulnerable, and stop worrying about their damn perfect image and their perfect career. Let's just be real. Let's talk about what's really going on.
Right. Well, and it's the numbers don't lie. First responders die more by suicide than line of duty death. You can tap dance around any statistic you want, but that one's the big elephant in the room that either you're going to acknowledge it or you're just ignorant.
Absolutely. And the numbers we have, as good as they are, they're way underreported. The real number is much, much higher. And I can't tell you how often we read on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, about, officer so-and-so or firefighter so-and-so died suddenly, and they're relatively young. There's no details shared. It wasn't at work. It wasn't a sickness. It's like we all know what really happened there.
It's easy to put two and two together there, yeah.
It is. And you know what? We've got to shed light on this. We've got to talk about it, because we can't keep sweeping it under the rug and pretending like it doesn't exist. We need to make our people.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
We need to make our people our number one priority. We need to truly care about them.
Yeah, the big frustrating thing for me is, you always hear about police and fire and the brotherhood. We're brothers. And as you touched on earlier, then why can't we talk about this stuff? But it's those same guys that preach brotherhood that when someone goes to seek help, they're chuckling about it or laughing about it. But yet if that person takes their own life, you always see those people at the funerals with the line on their badges mourning the person that lost it. You didn't lift a finger to try and, hey, you okay? You good? You need to talk? That's all it takes. You just got to be vulnerable and put it out there, put the ego aside, and just look out for one another.
Absolutely. You're going to save lives.
Right.
Absolutely. Save lives. And this is not difficult. It doesn't cost any money. It's just a matter of being real. That's all this is. We can change the culture. Therapists, they have their use, clinicians, but we can do so much on our own amongst our own peers, amongst our own law enforcement, our own firefighters. I mean, just imagine how much better things would be if we were just open and honest and real with each other without worrying about, our career or our promotion or how we look or our image.
Right. Well, that's the whole concept of, this podcast is about the firehouse table. Is that's where we sit at all hours of the day, and, so-and-so's going through a divorce. Hey, let's sit down and talk about it. How are your kids? We'll just sit there and just talk about it. But you'll do that, and that's okay. But when you start talking about your own personal feelings and that, it seems sometimes that's where it's taboo. Oh, we can't talk about that. That's, that shows weakness. And the peer support movement is growing, like we talked about earlier. It's getting better. The symposium I went to, the crowds are growing, and that's a great thing because the message is spreading. And I think it all has to do with departmental, like you touched on, the administrators getting involved. Like, hey, this is a big problem with our people. We need to address this. And then the peer support, like you said, clinicians do have their place. Therapists have their place. That's a great resource. So sometimes just sitting down and talking to somebody that's in that same trench with you can be the matter of life or death.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's go ahead and talk about the book some. So truth be told, I was one of your audiobook. My ADHD is too bad to just sit down and read a book because I just look around and I get distracted. So I love audiobooks. I love podcasts because I can listen to them when I'm in and out of the car or cutting the grass or something. And the way the book is written, I love the way. I don't think I've ever read a book that was done that way. So it's co-authored with Dr. Shauna Springer. And the format of it, I especially like the audiobook because it's not a third person reading it. You can tell when you're reading those chapters, it's you reading it and the emotion is there because it's you. And then once you tell your side of the story, Dr. Springer interprets everything. And I like the way it was done. It's kind of gives it a clinical aspect and then your personal aspect, and then her clinical aspect as to that chapter and what unfolded.
Yeah, our book is a very unique format, and I have to give Dr. Shauna Springer so much credit here because I want to talk about how this even came about because I never envisioned having a book or writing about this or anything. And right before COVID, Doc Springer reached out to me on LinkedIn. I didn't know her. I'd never met her. Our paths had never crossed. And she just wanted to set up a phone call to kind of introduce each other and just hear about what we're all doing in the mental health space. And so we did. We were talking. And at this point, she'd already written, I believe, 3 books, one on her own, 2 on her own, and a couple of some other people. She's a clinical psychologist. She worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. I mean, she's worked with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of combat veterans and first responders. And so she is a culturally competent clinician. And during our conversation, I told her my story, much of which is in the book. And in the book, I go all the way back to childhood until present day. And after hearing that, she asked me, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I kind of laughed and I said, well, I've been asked this before. I said, but honestly, I am burnt out from so much report writing, like in the military and law enforcement, just,
Right.
Tons and tons of reports. And I said, and because of post-traumatic stress injury, I don't have that same focus and that concentration, that drive that I once had. And so I just don't think I can get it done. And so we left our conversation at that. A couple weeks later, she calls me back and she's like, look, she said, I've heard hundreds and hundreds of trauma stories. She said, but your story it's just sitting with me. She's like, I can't stop thinking about it. And she said, your story is going to help save countless lives. And she said, you know what? I want to make this book happen. I want to do this book with you. I want to collaborate. I want to team up. I want to do this project with you. And without even meeting her in person, I knew in my heart it was right. And I said, let's do this. And so COVID happens. We didn't even meet until almost a year into this project. We were doing everything via Zoom every single week. And you already hit it on the head, but what makes it so unique is that, you have the firsthand, real life, gut-wrenching tale from a first responder talking about, both their private life, their family, the work, everything. And then you've got this culturally competent clinician who comes in, she breaks everything down, she explains it in very easy to understand terms. And she also validates the feelings and the experiences that I'm having. That all the readers and listeners like yourself, my story is going to be their story. It's not identical, but there's going to be countless things in this book that I guarantee that every single first responder, every single military member, their family members, their loved ones, they will all find so many things that they'll say, me too. I've been there, I get it, I understand it, or they're going to see the effects on their loved ones. And this book,
Right.
It's saving careers, it's saving relationships, but most importantly, it's absolutely saving lives. And when you mentioned about the reading, hey, I hate to read too, honestly. Like I'm an Audible guy, and one of our biggest regrets was that this book was out for over a year. We didn't release the Audible until July, actually, so it hasn't even been a full year. And when Doc Springer and I went into the recording studio to do this, I had to relive every single moment when I was doing that recording. And like you said, you're going to feel it. It's going to be like you're there. And Doc Springer does the same. She shares some of her personal experiences and some traumatic things that she went through. And so we each purposely, as difficult as it was, as draining as it was, and I'm going to tell you, it wiped me out recording this book because
it sounded like it. You could hear it.
And it had to, though. And that's the thing, is I wanted people to feel it. I wanted them to know that this is them, this is real. But I wanted them to know that there's a way out of this, no matter how dark it gets. And I got there so dark that I didn't want to be here anymore, that there is light, that there is help. And so, it's not just this gut-wrenching story where you read it and then you feel like crap afterwards. No, we provide a roadmap out of it. We show a path to healing. And that's what makes this so special and so powerful.
Right. Yeah, at the end of the book, you touch on, some of the resources that you use. I know we talked about Save a Warrior. That was one. You talked a lot about you attended was it the West Coast Trauma Retreat?
West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat, correct.
Okay. And then you also touched on something which after I read on, I started doing a lot of research, the DSR-SGB. Which I think I listened to that about dual sympathetic reset stellate ganglion block.
Correct. Yeah, I just say SGB because that's too much for me to say, but the stellate ganglion block, which actually when Doc Springer first called me, she told me about it. And I'll be honest with you, when she was talking about stellate ganglion block, I was like, no, this can't be legit. Like, this doesn't seem, I didn't tell Doc Springer that, but I'm sitting there listening to it going, this seems too good to be true. And in fact, like you, I started doing my own research after I had that conversation. I started talking to people that had the procedure done. And come to find out, this procedure has been around for over 100 years to treat pain. It's a very simple procedure. It's only supposed to be performed by a medical doctor, so an MD. They take a common anesthetic, which is basically used in like labor, childbirth, delivery, and they shoot it, or inject it, I should say, in a specific bundle of nerves in your neck. It's done under imaging. So whether that's sonogram or some kind of image device where they can see exactly where this is going. And the whole point is that it's to reduce or lessen the physical symptoms of that fight or flight post-traumatic stress injury. And the way it works is the amygdala, the primitive part of the brain, that's the one that causes those reactions, whether it's like extreme anger outbursts or the feeling that you want to go run away or you want to hide, all those different things, it slows that down, it diminishes it, and it allows you to do the conventional things like talk therapy, go to retreats, EMDR, all these other things, because I want people to know that SGB doesn't cure post-traumatic stress injury. It lessens the physical symptoms so that you can then do the psychological work. It's not like you
Right.
just go in an office, you get an injection, you're good to go, you're cured. No. I want people to understand that that's the start of the process. That's going to open you up and put you in the right place to start doing the real work to recover from post-traumatic stress injury. And so I've had it done. It's literally painless. I noticed effects right away. I think the overall effective rate is upwards of like 85% of people that get it done will feel.
That's pretty good.
It is good. And, usually they start with one injection, usually on the right side. And the next day they'll do one on the left side. And that's the thing is, like I said, it's virtually painless. There is cost behind it. But now even like the VA, Veterans Affairs, and some private healthcare companies are starting to fund these procedures. But there's also groups out there that support first responders and veterans that raise money and donate money so that we can get this done as well. So I definitely encourage people to look into it. You can just Google SGB for PTSD or Stellate Gangleon Block. There was a 60 Minutes episode that was actually done years and years ago. It turns out that like many of our special forces have been using this for many years, if not decades. So again, this is proven science. It's been around for a while, and I highly encourage you to look into it. And we talk about it in more detail in the book, like you said.
Yeah. So I'll see if I can't even find a link to the treatment and put it in the show notes. But that one really struck me. I was like, wow. Also, the advances in medicine, and I know that they're looking at ketamine therapy now for post-traumatic stress and depression, and they're using that to help with symptoms and treatment as well. Seems like it's just ever advancing, like everything else in medicine. But it's definitely, if there's more options and there's more things that people can do to seek or find relief from the complex PTS in their lives, and it's a great thing.
And that's the key, is that for most people, it takes a combination of different things.
Right.
It's not one thing that works for everybody or one thing that's going to work for you. And just as an example, so EMDR, it's used by a lot of therapists. It helps a lot of people. I've seen it done on many people. I've seen it work, but it didn't work on me. And so the reason why I bring this up is I don't want people to get discouraged or frustrated, because you have to try new things. You have to try different things. But just know,
Right.
go in it with the mindset that it may work, it may not work. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Press on and try something new, try something different, but don't stop. Don't give up. You got to stay in the fight. And, this takes time. It takes work. In my case, I waited 4 years of literally suffering in silence before I asked for help. And in my opinion, the longer you wait to ask for help, the longer it's going to take to get better. But it will happen. But no, there's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be advances. But in the end, I'm living proof that there's a whole new life out there, that you can overcome this, and you can still live a phenomenal life like I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's great. So, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're creeping up on an hour, just sitting here chatting about everything. But I know I wanted to ask you, or maybe just see if you wanted to promote things. So the First Responder Support Network, I know you said the West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat. And also, was it you that started the First Responders First?
No, I have a Facebook and an Instagram called First Responders First, but there's actually a treatment center now that has different locations that provides actual treatment for first responders. So my page is more of a resource page. I share articles, I share podcasts, I share things about my book. So just know that my page is not affiliated with that treatment program, but it is out there. But also
got
know
resources available for everybody.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. In the back of the book, we have tons of vetted resources. Anything from text lines and hotlines that are free. They're operated 24/7. They're answered by other first responders or culturally competent, therapists or clinicians. And people can you can reach out to them without ever sharing your name, your organization, and you can get help. You know, you don't necessarily have to ask for help. You can just seek it out and know that there are confidential, private ways that you can start this process. And so I encourage people, you know, if you have to, start there. Maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to people at your agency. Maybe you don't want to go to peer support, but you've got confidential hotlines and numbers that are vetted, that are free, and they can also connect you with local resources in your area. So definitely, you know, if you need it, reach out. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, first step's always the hardest.
It is. It is. And I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. Even 2 years into my recovery, I was still ashamed. But I'm to the point now where I look back and I know that day, that fateful day when I finally asked for help, that was the strongest, bravest thing I've ever done in my life. It was nothing in the military. It was nothing in civilian law enforcement. It wasn't my shooting. It was literally me raising my hand saying, look, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this by myself. I need help. I need somebody to help me with this.
Me too, brother. Me too. You know, it's that same thing, you know, you keep spinning your wheels doing the same thing. And, you know, once you get to that point where you finally tell yourself and admit to yourself, I can't do this on my own. It's going to end badly. I need help. And that's all you have to do. And again, first step's always the hardest. One thing that you shared, I think it was yesterday, I noticed, I think it was on your Facebook page. I saw that and I was like, wow. So I may have to steal it. I don't know if you have a copyright on it, but what did it say? The badge gives you an all access pass to everything you never wanted to see.
Yeah, I definitely don't have a copyright on that. That's not mine, but yeah, so share it away, but it's true. You know, we have our careers as firefighters, police officers, paramedics, dispatchers. We see and hear things and deal with things that 99.9% of the population never will. They don't have a clue as to what we have to endure. You know, people don't call 911 on their best days. They call 911 on the worst days of their life. And so,
correct.
As much as we want to pretend that this stuff isn't going to phase us, it's not going to bother us, that we can just detach, you know, you may try that. It may work for a few years, but at some point, that's not going to be enough. And so the alternative to that is just, hey, just address the humanity of it. Like, you know, after a bad call, when you're back at the station or you're back in the locker room, just get it off your chest. Just talk about it, vent. Say, you know what, like, man, I can't get this image right now out of my head, you know, or I had difficulty sleeping last night. I just kept thinking about that call. All you're doing is vocalizing your normal feelings, your normal reactions to the horrific, abnormal things that we have to see and deal with. And that's where we need to normalize this conversation about saying, hey, yeah, me too, right? Because if we're at the same call, trust me, I mean, we're all affected in different ways, but that's the key.
That's a good thing about the peer support networks that the departments are starting to utilize. So I'm a member of the peer support team here in Columbus, and we're kind of implanted or embedded amongst the troops. So when you see somebody having that, you say, hey, exactly, me too. Here's some resources. They can help you. And if you just want to sit down and talk and not worry about rumors or any word getting out, you know, it's 100% confidential. Let's go grab a cup of coffee. No beer. Stay away from the liquor.
Yes.
Don't go crawling in a bottle. Let's get a cup of coffee and sit down and just talk. And that's the key.
It is. And that conversation could save a life.
Yeah.
Absolutely save a life. That one single conversation can make all the difference.
So I know we discussed Audible. The book's available on Audible, and it's probably pretty much available anywhere else, correct? Where can people find it?
So the best place is Amazon. Amazon has the paperback, the hardcover, and Kindle and Audible links are through there as well. But it's also available online at Walmart, Barnes & Noble online, and like Apple Books. And, you know, there's all kinds of different things. But Amazon's the easiest. It's the quickest. It's called Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma. And today is the actual 2-year anniversary of the first release. So the paperback came out.
How about that?
Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Exactly. April 29th, 2022 is when the actual paperback came out. And then the Audible came out this last July. So again, you know, if you don't like to read like me, the Audible you can listen to in your car. You can listen to it in the bathroom while you're taking a shower. You can listen to it at the gym. You can listen to it at work, when you're report writing, whatever the case may be. But I assure you and promise you that if you pick this book up or you start listening to it, it will change your life and change your life for the better. Guaranteed.
Yeah, a lot of it will resonate amongst most if not all first responders. I highly recommend the Audible because you get the full experience. You can actually listen to it in your voice. And it's almost like the reader or the listener is there with you, reliving that. And the one thing, about trauma and complex PTS, when you have one of those really horrific events, you always tend to hyper focus on one particular thing. And I had one of those Me Too moments when you were explaining what happened. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the blue knife and how you just kept saying, I just saw this blue knife and it just struck me as odd. And every one of these traumatic experiences I've gone through, there's always something you look at and that for some reason is what you remain focused on. And I always thought that was kind of weird.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's different for everybody. And, we never know what that call or that moment's going to be for us, that breaking point. It's not always the obvious ones. It's not always the biggest ones. So just be ready and prepare yourself ahead of time so that when those incidents do happen, you already have the resources. You have established peer support relationships. You have a good communication with your wife or your spouse at home. You've got that aspect. You've got friends at work who are true friends who you can open up to and be vulnerable. And just know you'll get through it. If you take advantage of these resources and you have that support system, you will get through it.
Right. Well, again, just to remain respectful of your time, we're coming up on an hour. I know you do a lot of public speaking. Is there any upcoming events you want to put out there for people? Where can people see you and listen to you speak?
Well, first of all, I'm on all social media platforms. So if people want to reach out to me, please do. If you read or listen to the book, I want to hear your thoughts. And I will respond to every single message on all my platforms. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Parler, Truth. I mean, you name it, I'm on every freaking platform. So just type in Sergeant Michael Sugrue, and I promise you, I will get back to you. As far as speaking engagements, I'm going to be, in Florida in August. I'm going to be in Beaver Creek, Ohio, I believe, in October, of all places.
I'm going to try and make it.
And I've got a few in the works, possibly San Jose. I've got a local one here in August as well in the San Francisco Bay Area. But I only speak 4 to 5 times a year, so I don't do it full time. My focus is my family, my daughter, my health, living life to the fullest. So
as it should be.
Absolutely. That's what's most important. For so long, I was focused on my career and that next assignment, the next promotion, and none of that mattered. What matters is you and your loved ones. That's what matters. So that's my focus.
Put the family above the career. That's for some guys. That's really hard to do. Is putting the family above that career, but you have to.
Absolutely. It'll be the best decision you ever make. So please reach out. I'd love to hear from you, and I promise you, I will get back to you.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoy what you heard, be sure to drop us a follow. We'll try to release a new episode every other week. If you feel so inclined, take a moment and give us a review. Your support only serves to make this podcast better. And if you know of any first responder, military veteran, or family member who you think would be a great guest for us, drop us a line. Our email address is firehousetabltalks@gmail.com. Be safe, look out for one another, and we'll see you around the table next time.
'Cause after time around the firehouse kitchen table, we can go home to the one.